In the first part of this presentation, we provided an overview of dWebSpec as well as its usage for capturing the specification of the visual aspects of web applications. In this section, it is the capture of the specification of the dynamic aspects of web pages using dWebSpec that is discussed. As we have illustrated earlier, the content source would capture the visual presentation aspects of the page. It is the descriptors that capture the dynamic activities of the elements identified on the page. Such dynamic activities involve the interchange of data with the server, the invocation of server-side event handling, as well as dynamic or partial re-rendering. We will illustrate the capture of these specifications with two of the templates, the form and element descriptors. The entries in the element descriptors start with the capture of the identities of elements on the page that are involved in dynamic activities. The value binding captures the objects and their attributes that are the sources of data displayed by the elements and destination of their input data. The conversion type is also important since entries in the browsers are in the form of character strings, which must be converted to or be compatible with the bound object attribute types. The specifications also call for some validations. The limitations of the name entered must be at least 6 but no more than 25 characters is represented with max length and min length validators. The limitations that the date entered must be a valid calendar date is represented with the type validator. This validator is used to specify that the entries for an element must be validated for compatibility with the specified conversion type, which is date in this case. The US month first format is also specified as the format. The restriction that both name and date be required is represented by setting the required attribute to true. The specification calls for the input elements to be enabled during registration entries and disabled for the confirmation stage. This is captured by applying the not registered behavior to the enabled attributes of the input elements. dWebSpec behaviors are logical expressions or method bindings that are defined in the behavior descriptors and provided with symbolic names that could be referenced elsewhere. 3 other behavior specifications would be needed for the visibility status. These would capture the specifications that confirmation registration number and the OK buttons should only appear after the registration exercise, whereas the Save button must be visible during pre-registration confirmation to allow saving the registration entries. These are captured by applying the behaviors to the visible attributes. The validation specification could be expanded to include the messages shown when errors exist. Most successful applications end up including some form of internationalization or localization. To accommodate this, all text like validation messages, validation parameters, format strings, and captions could be externalized. By externalization, we mean replacing these text strings with keys. It is these keys that would be associated with real text inside a resource file. Subsequently, other resource files could be added for other languages or localities. We have captured the specifications for the elements on the page. There are other specifications that would be captured on the form level. The starting point is also the registration of the identity of the form, followed by the value binding or data source. It has been specified that the page validations would be required both on the client and the server side. Just like the validation specifications on the element level, there could be validations or business rules applications on the form level. For our example, we capture the specification that the date selected must have a scheduled conference with the conference date validator, and the validation to ensure that there is space to accommodate the new registration with the capacity validator. It could be seen that there are placeholders for all the specification aspects of our dynamic page example. Although most of the specifications of our small application show up in the form and element descriptors, the full specification would involve other dWebSpec descriptors. For example, the handling of the click events for the OK and Save buttons are captured in the event descriptors. The specifications involving the ensuing navigation paths after event handling are captured with the navigational path descriptors. We had shown the segment on the page that would be rendered only after successful registration. This segment is represented in the segment descriptor along with the behavior that would dictate its visibility status. The definitions involving objects used on the page, as well as the package, namespace, and class definitions are captured in the behavior descriptor. The behavior expressions and bindings, as well as their symbolic identifiers, are also captured in the behavior descriptor. With these comprehensive descriptor entries and the representations in the source content, we have now a comprehensive blueprint for the implementation. In the final part of this presentation, we shall demonstrate how the captured specification would be implemented on 3 common platforms, namely Struts, JSF, and ASP.NET.